we go. Okay, good afternoon. This is the last talk of the symposium, so please stick with me until the coffee break. I'm really excited to talk with you today about my studies exploring social and cultural curiosity in children and chimpanzees. I'm currently a postdoc at UC Berkeley working with Alison, Gopnik and Jan Engelmann, but this summer I'll be starting as an assistant professor in psychology and anthropology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. So I want to start with a quick video. Now, I like starting with this video not only because you can see a booger in his nose, but also I think it's a really wonderful demonstration of curiosity in the wild. This is a chimpanzee in Uganda caught on a camera trap who's clearly very curious about the camera trap and this novel object in its environment. And as we've seen today across a number of fabulous talks and wonderful posters, a number of us study curiosity in these physical contexts. So thinking about physical objects, physical goals, curiosity about one's physical environment. I think the vast majority of research on curiosity has focused on the physical environment. I'm someone who's incredibly interested in our social environment and how social cognition evolves and develops in great apes. So that's what I'll be exploring today. So we know that, that curiosity is broadly defined as the drive to gain information, but I'm really interested in what I'm defining as social curiosity, which is the drive to gain social information. So the majority of my talk will focus on studies exploring social curiosity, and then at the end I'll just preview some new preliminary data exploring cultural curiosity, so what I'm calling the drive to gain cultural information. So the driving question behind all of this research is how does social and cultural curiosity evolve and develop in great apes? So I'll present 4 studies today. The first explores curiosity about single agents versus social interactions. The second explores social interactions versus reward. The third, I'm exploring curiosity for positive interactions versus negative social interactions. And then finally, I'll present a new study exploring curiosity about familiar versus unfamiliar cultural traditions. Okay, so we know that social curiosity, as I've just described, is the drive to gain new information about one's social environment. And this is really critical to learning and information about one's social world. And it enables efficient information gathering about conspecifics, or members of one's own species. It also helps to reduce uncertainty, improve prediction, and increase control on our social environments. I think that social curiosity really guides social learning for representations of relationships and also the formation of social bonds, which, as we know, both for humans and our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, social bonds are incredibly important to our survival and well-being. So here I'm really exploring social curiosity for social interactions and social relationships. And I think that social interactions and relationships provide a greater amount of information than just a single individual alone. This can be really evolutionary relevant, evolutionary important information. This is grounded in partner choice theory. So by gaining information about others and how they interact with their peers, we can begin to understand which individuals may be pro-social, competitive or cooperative, knowledgeable or dominant, etc. So therefore, I think that it's really advantageous to gain information from social interactions and then to be able to integrate and use this information in order to guide the formation and maintenance of social relationships across decades, as we do in humans and our closest living cousins. Okay, so in this first pre-register study, we're asking the question, are children and chimpanzees more willing to gain information about social interactions between agents compared to information about agents acting alone? And we hypothesize that both children and chimpanzees are more willing to gain information about these social interactions over information about a single alone conspecific. Okay, so we had two participant populations. The first are children in the Bay Area. So these are 30 children aged 4 to 6 years old. We tested them at a science museum and a zoo in the beautiful Bay Area, pictured here. We had families that were diverse in ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and educational achievements, and they receive a small sticker for participation. Now, I've designed the exact same paradigm for testing with children and chimpanzees. So last year I spent a couple of months working with 27 chimpanzees aged 15 to 35 years old, living on this Ngamba Island chimpanzee sanctuary in Uganda. It's a small, very remote island in the middle of Lake Victoria in Uganda. You can see here the buildings are mostly human buildings. I guess I can't. Is my cursor there? And this is where the chimpanzees have their sleeping rooms. So there are 53 rescued chimpanzees in total living on this remote island with lush tropical forest. So they sleep in the sleeping building at night, and then in the morning, first thing, we wake up and we do voluntary research with them, and then in the afternoon, they are allowed to go out and range in the forest in the afternoon. One thing I absolutely love about this site in particular is that it's incredibly voluntary for chimpanzees to participate in this research. So they actually are not forced to come into these sleeping rooms at night. They are allowed to stay out in the forest if they'd like. So usually about 10 of them actually stay in the forest, sleeping in the forest at night, and then they don't participate in the research in the morning, which they know they would if they slept in the sleeping room. So it's incredibly voluntary for them to even come back into these rooms in the first place, and then typically the research lasts only a few minutes, and then they're allowed to range in the forest again. Okay, so this is what the method setup looks like for all 4 studies. So pay attention close here, because this is the methods that I'll be using across all of the studies I talk about today. So for children, we present 2 wooden boxes on a table, spaced about 3 feet apart, 1 meter apart, equidistant from the participant. These wooden boxes, what I call curiosity boxes, have sliding vertical doors, so children and chimpanzees can pull the doors up, slide them open, and inside is a tablet with videos playing on them. So in this way, we can really measure their curiosity for some videos over others. Children are given 30 seconds to explore these boxes in a trial, and they receive 4 trials back to back. So in this first study, in the social box, there are videos of social interactions between 2 kids. And in the non-social box, there's just a video of a single agent acting alone. These are actually the exact same videos of the social interactions that we just split in half. So the single agents are doing the same actions, but they're alone in this non-social box. We have videos from 4 different contexts, including playing, grooming, caregiving, and conflict, both for chimpanzees and for children. And instead of using the normal sounds from the videos, we actually overlay just ambient rainforest sounds so that there aren't any sounds that may be biasing their curiosity for one box over the other. So in this way, we can measure out of the 30 seconds for children and out of a minute for chimpanzees how long they're looking in one box and the other, and also how high they're opening the doors. If you can see the stripes on the boxes, that's actually measuring the height that children are raising these doors. So they receive 2 familiarizations before the test trials in order to gain some sense of what is contained in each box. Okay, here's a quick video of a child performing the task. So you can see now he chooses to go to the other box. I love he listens first, and then he opens. And this is the exact same thing. This is chimp doing the box. One warning is that I had to make these boxes chimp-proof. If the chimps used the children's boxes, they would have destroyed them immediately. So I used very thick wood in order to make these boxes chimp-proof. So you can see one chimp who was just watching one video and chooses to go to the next and is curious about what's inside. Okay. So again, for most of these studies, for all of these studies, our main DV is how long children and chimpanzees spend looking inside each box. We had additional DVs, like the likelihood to open each box and how high each door was lifted. In this first study, our conditions are the social condition versus the non-social condition. So our test effects, we have condition, context, and age, with control effects of sex, trial number, and participant ID. Okay, so these are the results from the first study. On the y-axis, we have time, so total amount of time they spent looking inside each box. On the x-axis, we have the condition, non-social versus social. First, we found that children are more willing to open the social versus the non-social box, and children look significantly longer at these social videos versus the non-social videos. And children actually trend towards opening that social box wider as well. We found similar results from chimpanzees. So chimpanzees also look longer at the social videos, look significantly longer at the social videos versus the non-social videos. But they're not necessarily more willing to open the social box versus the non-social box. So they open them an equal amount of time, but then they spend longer, significantly longer amounts of time actually looking at the social box. So it seems that children are more willing to open the social box as compared to the non-social box. And both chimpanzees and children look significantly longer at these social videos versus the non-social videos. Children also trend towards opening the social box wider. So it seems from these results that both children and chimpanzees are more curious about social interactions between two agents as compared to a single agent acting on their own. I think it's likely that these interpersonal interactions provide more information than just a single agent acting on their own. Not only are you learning information about one agent and the other, but you're also learning some information about the nature of their relationship as well. So next we wanted to understand, is information about social interactions actually rewarding? This is something I think a lot of us are thinking about, is information rewarding, and if so, how rewarding might it be? So this is where what we explored in the second study. This picture makes no sense to you at all for the moment, but just stay tuned. I promise it will make sense soon. So in a second pre-register study, we asked two questions. One, is social information rewarding? And two, will children and chimpanzees choose to gain social information over a physical reward? We hypothesize that social information is rewarding for children and chimpanzees such that they actually will choose to gain social information over a reward. Okay, so we tested 30 children and 16 chimpanzees in the same locations. Now we have these two boxes again. In the video box, we have a tablet with videos playing on it. And in the reward box, we have a remote-controlled reward dispenser. This is actually a pet treat dispenser that we just re-opted to use here as a reward dispenser. So it had a remote control that experimenter 2 could surreptitiously dispense these rewards. For kids, we dispensed marbles, and then for chimpanzees, we dispensed jackfruit seeds, which is what you see in the picture here. They didn't automatically fit in the treat dispenser, so I had to spend hours carving them into marble shapes. The Ugandan caretakers helped me a little bit, and they could do them in seconds, but it took me a very long time to make these jackfruit marbles. So kids received actual marbles, and chimps received jackfruit seeds that they like to eat somewhat, but it's not their favorite food. So in the social condition, we have videos of social interactions, similar to study 1. For chimpanzees, we just use interactions of conflicts. And in the non-social condition, we had videos of an agent acting alone for kids and no video for chimpanzees. We didn't actually know the results from the first study when running this study, which is why we wanted to kind of make this, this difference more apparent for the chimps. Okay, so here we're really wondering how long children and chimpanzees spend away from the reward box. So how willing they are to give up that reward. And again, their conditions are these social and non-social conditions with the same test and control effects. And this is what we found with the children. So again, on this y-axis is, again, this time away from the reward box. And on the x-axis is age in years. We found that younger children spend significantly more time away from the reward box in the social condition. And there were no effects of gender or context. So younger children were spending more time away from the reward box in the social condition, but then as they aged, they flipped. So older children were actually spending more time away from the reward box in the non-social condition. Here are the results from the chimpanzees. Again, on the y-axis is that time away from the reward, condition on the x-axis. We found that chimpanzees spend significantly more time away from the reward box in the video condition, in that social condition. Interestingly, we found that male chimpanzees spent significantly more time at the video box in the video condition, whereas females did not. So not only were they spending more time away from the reward, but they were actually going and gaining more social information in that social condition. So it seems that young children and chimpanzees spend more time away from the reward box in the social condition, and that male chimpanzees spend more time at the video box in the social condition. So it seems that young children and chimpanzees are more willing to give up a reward in order to gain social information. And what we're wondering here is whether this information from those second results from the chimpanzees, whether information about conflicts, is what we are showing here, is more rewarding for male chimpanzees than it is for females. We're also wondering if social information is actually more rewarding for younger children based on these results. But I think what we can conclude here is that information about interpersonal interactions is rewarding, so rewarding, in fact, that some individuals are willing to give up rewards that they really like in order to go gain social information. Okay, in a third study, we're exploring social curiosity about positive versus negative social interactions. Here we're asking the question, are children and chimpanzees more curious about positive interactions or negative interactions? We thought that chimps and children would be more curious about negative interactions over positive interactions. But there's an alternative that they could actually be more curious about positive interactions versus negative social interactions. So we're wondering what might be more informative, positive social interactions or negative social interactions. I like to play just a quick mind game. Imagine you're sitting down to dinner on a summer night and you have two windows on either side of you that are open. And from one window on the street below, you hear some fighting start to happen. And out of the other window on the street below, you start to hear a friend group cracking up, laughing. Which might you go to first? This actually happens. I live in a very busy area, so I'm constantly eating dinner by my window, watching social interactions on the street below. But if you think for a minute, what might be more informative for you? A negative social interaction, like fighting, or a more positive social interaction? So this is what we're wondering with children and chimpanzees as well. So positive interactions might give you information about individuals who may be helpful, friendly, cooperative, collaborative. But negative interactions also, very importantly, may provide information about individuals who may be competitive or more dominant or more combative or stronger. So we're using the same paradigm here. We tested 35 children, and 27 chimpanzees here. In the positive condition, we have videos of positive social interactions like grooming or doing one another's hair and playing. And the negative condition is videos of negative social interactions like conflicts or crying. You can see a still from one of the videos here. So they're never actually physically hitting each other, but kind of a tug-of-war game. And this is what we find. So again, time spent in each box on the y-axis, age on the x-axis. We found that girls, as they age, they shift towards looking longer at positive interactions. But boys, as they age, they shift towards looking longer at negative interactions. And I just want to highlight here, okay. So these young boys start by being more interested in the positive social interactions, and then at a certain point they flip. And I think this point at which they flip actually is pretty interesting. This is right around 5 years old, where in the US kids start to go to kindergarten and start to be surrounded much more by their peers. So I think this is a really interesting age period for which we see this flip, and we know that children are starting to go to school. And so their social environment likely is changing a bit. So we see that girls are shifting towards watching positive interactions as they age, where boys are the opposite. They shift towards watching negative interactions significantly longer as they age. Chimps did not demonstrate any greater curiosity for positive or negative interactions. And so what I'm wondering here with the kids is whether this may be a result of socialization patterns or evolutionary pressures, or what I'm actually thinking is that it's likely a combination of both, that it may be important for boys to be paying more attention to negative interactions, but likely once they get to school, there's a lot of social and cultural pressures that they're facing that may help with this shift, that may shift them in different directions from their peers that are girls. Okay, In the last few minutes, I just want to tease a new study that we're doing now, exploring cultural curiosity. So we're wondering, are children more curious about familiar cultural traditions or unfamiliar cultural traditions? And we hypothesize that as they develop, children become more curious about unfamiliar cultural traditions versus familiar ones. Okay, so familiar traditions provide information about salient, important group information that could help with group integration. But there's also really important information coming from unfamiliar cultures. So information, for example, about outgroup traditions, potential competitors, and also possible mates. Okay, so this summer we tested 135 children with an expanded age range from 4 to 12 years old. In the familiar condition, they saw videos of familiar US cultural traditions, like a yellow school bus or a state fair. In the unfamiliar condition, they saw matched cultural traditions, but from an unfamiliar culture. So a rickshaw school bus in India or a foreign food fair in Korea. We next asked an explicit question, explicit questions after these tasks. So we asked kids to point to one box or the other in response to these questions. Which video were you more curious about? Which video did you like more? And which video did you want to learn more about? So we have this explicit measure of curiosity along with our implicit measure of them opening the boxes. So first, this is what we're finding, that children look, these are, again, preliminary results, that children look significantly longer at familiar cultural traditions. And we didn't find any effect of age. So from 4 to 12 years old, children are looking longer at these familiar cultural traditions. But we found something quite interesting with the questionnaire, from the questionnaire results. So children actually answered that they were more curious about unfamiliar cultural traditions, that they wanted to learn more about unfamiliar cultural traditions, but that they equally liked both videos, both the familiar and unfamiliar traditions. So we think these questionnaire answers are kind of demonstrating explicit curiosity for the unfamiliar cultural traditions, in contrast with this more implicit curiosity of them actually watching familiar traditions more. So we're wondering if there's a dissociation somewhat between explicit and implicit curiosity. Okay, so yeah, I really think there's something here that may be indicating some dissociation between one's implicit curiosity and explicit curiosity early in childhood. So the next steps we're working on now is to design an online version to test adults to see if there's more association between implicit and explicit curiosity. With adults, we're designing the exact same curiosity boxes, but in an online version. And of course, knowing the work that I do, I'd love to do this work and do cross-species comparisons and also cross-cultural studies as well. Okay, so just to wrap up, I think that there are similar mechanisms driving social curiosity in children and non-human great apes. I think information about social interactions and others is rewarding. We know that as boys age, they become more curious about negative interactions, whereas girls age, they become more curious about positive interactions. So it seems that children might have implicit curiosity about familiar cultural traditions, but explicit curiosity about more unfamiliar cultural traditions. So I think, in summary, that children and chimpanzees represent and utilize differences in the magnitude and type of social and cultural information to explore their environments. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank my amazing team, collaborators, advisors, research assistants. None of this would be possible without the chimpanzee care staff, so I'd really like to thank them for this work, and of course, my funding with the program. And thank you very much to the conference organizers. It's been a wonderful time so far. So happy to take any questions.
I think there is time for one question.
Thank you very much for the wonderful data. I had a question related to the very last study where you have the explicit and the implicit. And I have a very hard time thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're measuring at one point and you either have one or the other, but you cannot have both, right? So I cannot be, so assuming I'm curious at one moment, I can be either in A or B, but then I cannot be explicitly in A and implicitly in B curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the very same time point. So either this happens at different time points, or one of them is not measuring curiosity. And I was wondering which one you think is not measuring curiosity, or is different time points, or how should we think about it?
That's a great question. Yeah. Okay, the time points one is interesting. I think in some sense that's right? Like you can be at the box and be curious about both. But I think what's nice about this timing that children are given 30 seconds is that if there is greater curiosity for one over the other, then they should be spending more time at one box over the other, which is what we're finding, right, in a lot of these studies, that even though they might have curiosity about both, they have stronger curiosity for one over the other. So I think that's right, though, that you can have curiosity for both at the exact same time, but one might be stronger over the other, which is what we're finding. I think, for example, with the chimpanzees, where we don't find a difference in how long they're spending looking at positive interactions versus negative interactions, that might indicate kind of an equal curiosity about both, right? But your second point, yes, it's definitely perplexing, and I think with the questionnaire, I don't know if we're only explicitly measuring explicit curiosity there. I've talked with several people and myself think that there could be something going on with the experimenter asking the question and children assuming that there's a right answer, right? That they think they should be more curious about unfamiliar traditions over familiar ones, and so they might be answering based on what they think the experimenter expects of them. So that's why we're turning towards adults and doing an online version to see whether there's kind of a similar patterns there with adults or not. But I think we need to look more into this questionnaire and think about other ways that we might be able to ask it. One last point is that we could also ask children. Children could technically point to both. So we just had this pointing, there was no speaking, and they almost never pointed to both at the same time. So I think that also speaks to kind of, that they may be curious about both, but curiosity about one may be stronger than the other. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, our time for questions is up, so let's thank the organizers and the speakers of the symposium.
Thank you.
See you upstairs for the poster session, and please be on time when you're coming back.